That's right, Stephanie. Now, this is news that actually broke late last week on The Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois' podcast. CEO of Dainty Foods, James Maitland, telling the host of the podcast that the company is looking to expand operations into the U.S.
We are about to announce in the next couple months a new U.S. facility that will be sinking roughly $50 to $75 million into over the next 4 years to support the growth of our company.
Canada just got slapped across the face by its own food industry, and the sting couldn't be louder. Dainty Foods, a company that's been producing rice in Canada for over a century, has decided that its future isn't in Windsor, Ontario, but across the border in Trump's America. A $50 to $75 million expansion into the US might sound like business as usual, but make no mistake, this is a corporate defection. And it comes at the worst possible time for Canada's fragile economy. CEO James Maitland tried to sugarcoat the announcement with promises of 30 new jobs in Windsor and a $35 million Canadian investment. But let's be real.
There's nothing to be concerned about Dainty Foods jobs. Hearing Dainty investing in the U.S. is only going to make Dainty Canada stronger because of the synergies between the two organizations, but there's zero risk for Dainty Canada at all.
On the contrary, he points to a $35 million investment in Canada over the past 3 years and a new distribution center opening in Windsor this January, adding 30 jobs locally.
That's crumbs compared to what's heading south. And it exposes the brutal reality. Canada's boycott strategy and Carney's weak economic policies aren't keeping businesses home. They're driving them away. This is just the beginning. Stick around, because what comes next will shock you. Like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Dainty Foods' announcement didn't come from some grand stage in Ottawa or a patriotic Canadian backdrop. No, it was revealed casually on the Food Professor podcast, almost as if the company wanted to slip it under the radar. But the numbers are too big to ignore. A $50 to $75 million investment in a brand new U.S. facility, while Canada gets the consolation prize of 30 jobs and a $35 million expansion in Windsor. On paper, it sounds balanced. In reality, it's a calculated retreat. Dainty isn't stupid. The company sees where the winds are blowing. In the U.S., Donald Trump's America First policies are back in full swing. Tax incentives, deregulation, cheap energy, and aggressive protectionism make America a safe haven for businesses looking to grow. In Canada, meanwhile, Mark Carney is trying to sell resilience while propping up boycotts and tariffs that are actively driving companies away. It's the economic equivalent of handing your competitor a loaded weapon and then acting surprised when they fire. Look at the timing. Canada's economy is already under siege. Food prices are climbing, strikes are breaking out across multiple industries, and 1 in 5 small businesses says they can't survive the next 6 months. Yet while families are rationing groceries, Carney's big solution has been to flex on trade wars with Washington. Ottawa slapped tariffs on U.S. alcohol and food products in a show of strength, but the move backfired instantly. Shelves emptied, prices jumped, and now Canadian companies like Dainty are realizing their growth simply isn't sustainable inside Canada's fragile market. And here's where the irony burns. Dainty is one of Canada's oldest food producers, operating in Windsor since 1882. It has weathered world wars, depressions, recessions, you name it. But in 2025, under Carney's so-called leadership, the company decides it needs to move its future south. That's not just a corporate decision. That's a verdict on Carney's entire economic strategy. Of course, Maitland tried to soften the blow. He stressed that Windsor isn't being abandoned, pointing to that $35 million local investment. He claimed the U.S. move would strengthen Dainty Canada by expanding production capacity and building resilience. But viewers should ask, strengthen for whom? Canadian workers aren't the ones seeing hundreds of millions in new opportunities. That windfall is going to American workers, American suppliers, and American consumers, all thanks to Trump's pro-business environment. Now compare that to Canada's trajectory. Instead of easing burdens, Ottawa piles them on. Energy costs are sky high. Inflation is eating household budgets alive. Interest rates, pushed up by Carney's monetary experiments, have crushed small businesses and homebuyers alike. And tariffs, Carney's answer to Trump, are hitting Canadian wallets harder than anyone in Washington. Even the Canadian Chamber of Commerce warned that Carney's tariff policies could erase tens of thousands of jobs in manufacturing and retail. Yet the government barrels ahead, waving the boycott flag while businesses like Dainty quietly pack their bags. The symbolism here matters. Dainty isn't just any company. It's a Canadian staple supplying rice to grocery stores, restaurants, and food banks for generations. When a company this deeply rooted decides it needs America to survive, that tells you everything about where Canada stands in this so-called trade war. It's not a war at all, it's a rout. Trump is stacking up victories while Carney clings to failed strategies that leave Canadians paying more and getting less. And here's the kicker. Carney still wants you to believe that these moves are temporary adjustments, that Dainty's American adventure is somehow part of a larger Canadian success story. But history doesn't lie. When businesses start shifting core production outside their home base, they rarely bring it back. This isn't just a temporary hedge, it's the start of a permanent realignment. Windsor gets scraps while the US secures the feast. But that wasn't the whole story. Because as Dainty packs its bags for America, Canada's broader economic foundation is cracking under pressure, and the ripple effects are only beginning to show. If Dainty's move were just an isolated case, maybe Canadians could shrug it off, but it isn't. This is part of a much bigger unraveling, and it exposes just how badly Carney's policies are failing. One by one, Canadian companies are realizing they can't survive in a system that punishes growth while rewarding political optics. And while Carney lectures about global cooperation and cutting new deals with Mexico or the EU, Trump is busy locking in real wins at home. Look at the numbers. The US slapped a brutal 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum earlier this year. Canada retaliated with 25% tariffs on US goods, including alcohol, food, and household items. But here's the difference. The US can absorb the shock. Canada can't. Those tariffs ricochet back onto Canadian consumers, who are now paying record prices on everything from beer to bread. And when households are already stretched thin by inflation, those extra costs push them over the edge. This is why 1 in 5 Canadian businesses say they won't survive the next 6 months. Restaurants are shuttering, retail is collapsing, and even small manufacturers are cutting hours or laying off staff. In New Brunswick, the provincial government is staring down a $120 million budget shortfall because tax revenues are evaporating. In Ontario, the so-called alcohol boycott is backfiring spectacularly. Consumers aren't punishing the US. They're punishing themselves as shelves run dry and prices skyrocket. Meanwhile, south of the border, Trump is handing out incentives like candy. Lower corporate taxes, streamlined regulations, a domestic energy boom that keeps costs down. For companies like Dainty, the decision is a no-brainer. Do you expand in Canada, where you'll get crushed under tariffs, high energy prices, and endless bureaucracy? Or do you take Trump's golden ticket, set up shop in the US, and watch your profits soar? It's not even a question. And here's the political reality. Every time a Canadian company chooses America, Trump scores another victory in the trade war. He gets to stand on stage and say, "Look, Canadian businesses want to be here. Jobs are coming back. Factories are opening," and he's right. It reinforces his entire narrative that America first works. Meanwhile, Carney is left scrambling, spinning half-truths about resilience and long-term strategy, while Canadian families and workers see their futures slipping away. The cracks are already visible in daily life. Grocery bills are up double digits. Teachers are striking in multiple provinces, demanding relief from soaring living costs. Taxi drivers and airline workers are walking off the job. And yet, instead of fixing the fundamentals, Carney doubles down on the globalist rhetoric, boasting about trade partnerships with Europe while ignoring the collapse happening at home. Let's be clear, none of this is abstract. When Dainty shifts its production south, it's not just a boardroom shuffle. It's fewer jobs for Canadians, less food security, and more dependence on American supply chains. The same America that has already shown it's willing to weaponize trade whenever it suits them. This isn't just about rice, it's about sovereignty. And Carney is letting it slip through his fingers. Now contrast that with Trump's approach. He doesn't care about winning polite applause at international summits. He cares about results, jobs, investment, growth. When a company sets up in America, he celebrates it as proof that his agenda is working. And businesses keep coming because the conditions make sense. It's not complicated, it's effective. But here's the twist. Dainty's move might just be the beginning of a larger exodus. If one of Canada's most historic food companies is voting with its feet, what's stopping others? Lumber giants are cutting production. Manufacturing plants are scaling back. Even tech firms are quietly exploring US relocation. The trend is undeniable. Canada is bleeding investment, and Carney either doesn't see it or doesn't care. So here's the bottom line. Dainty Foods' $75 million move south isn't just about rice. It's about a Canadian economy in free fall, with Mark Carney at the wheel, driving blindfolded into oncoming traffic. Every tariff, every boycott, every hollow speech about resilience has only made life harder for Canadians, while Trump sits back and racks up win after win. The message from Dainty is crystal clear. If you want stability, growth, and opportunity, you go to America. And if Carney stays in charge, Canada will keep losing its companies, its jobs, and maybe even its future. The cracks are widening. The question is, how much longer will Canadians tolerate it? If you think Carney's policies are failing and that Canada deserves better, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Because the debate is just getting started, and your voice needs to be heard.